Well, hi, everybody. I'm Kim Winter. I'm your host today. It's my pleasure to be hosting David Ames from Zim Thailand, the Managing Director of Zim Integrated Shipping. Hey, Dave, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Kim. It's very much a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thanks for joining us from Bangkok. And we trust that everything's going okay there. We hear that Thailand as a country is managed pretty well compared to many other countries around the world. So well done to you guys.
Thanks very much, Kim. Yeah, actually today is, I believe, our 100th day without a domestic COVID case. So that's quite a milestone for the country. And I think, largely within country, things have returned to a semi-state of normalness, if you will.
Yeah, well, that's really impressive, and I'm sure a lot of the audience have been used to visiting Thailand over the years as a holiday destination, and I know that both from a visitor and I know from the locals will be looking forward to getting the borders open again and the people of Thailand enjoying having people come and visit them again. So Dave, Zim Shipping, one of the largest shipping companies in the world, want to give us, before we get into Zim, perhaps a little bit of a background on yourself and your journey through the supply chain.
Sure, very much, Kim. I began my career in container shipping 33 years ago. I was a management trainee with APL based out of Chicago, spending most of my time in the intermodal division. So that's stack train, truck, and then gradually moved out to the ports and spent some time in Vancouver in the port activity. Later then into Atlanta to work at the customer service center in Atlanta, handling Latin America, special cargoes. And after that, I moved overseas. I moved to Thailand in 1998, handling the automotive logistics piece of APL logistics at the GM plant in Rayong. We had a JIT operation with GM in Rayong, and that brought me to Thailand in 1998. From there, I moved back into container shipping in Indonesia, where I was the managing director for APL in Indonesia. I then left APL and went into pharmaceutical logistics, which was very much a change of pace and very much a different product, which was really good experience. I worked with Zulik Pharma, both in Philippines and in Korea. And then I took some time away from the industry. I came back a year later, moved back to Thailand, working for Taurus & Thai, which is a bulk ship operator specializing in Handymax and Supermax bulkers, which was a great experience because that really gave me insight from a ship owner perspective, which was really, really helpful. And then from there, I moved to Linfox, which is an organization you're probably very familiar with. It's a huge 3PL in Australia, but also a dramatic and major presence here in Thailand, where we were running about 4 million kilometers a week, predominantly to support Tesco Lotus here in Thailand. After that, I left Linfox and I went to work for CMA. And then just a couple of years ago, I came to work at Zim. And Zim has gone through a dramatic change here in Thailand. It's been really, really a lot of fun and a lot of hard work to restart this agency in the last couple of years. And I think we've done quite well.
Sure. So, I guess one of the big ticket news items have been, apart from the aviation sector striking all sorts of really rough weather that our audience will be well aware of worldwide, the shipping industry seems to have coped through 2020 pretty well with some fairly spectacular results coming out in recent weeks even about how well some of the shipping companies and the ocean carriers have done. How have you guys gone during the last 6 months or so? And how have you been managing capacity around that? Because that seems to be one of the really big issues that have been success or failures for a lot of organizations.
Absolutely. I mean, clearly the shipping industry came under just such enormous impact. And I will say that almost all carriers took fairly swift action to reduce capacity and really rationalize the use of their assets. Particularly early on, when China was so dramatically impacted, and everyone was we were starting to see ships sailing light. Carriers really were very quick and nimble to focus attention on the other origins, specifically Southeast Asia, and the India subcontinent. And those locations were very much tested to produce volume. And I think something else that the carriers have done well in this instance is they've been very prudent about the gradual reintroduction of capacity. And, we're seeing it now that we're entering peak season. We're seeing a lot more capacity come into the market, but it has been gradual, and there's been some retooling of some of the services that make it better for carriers in terms of utilization. I think it's worthwhile noting that during COVID, there's been some really interesting developments. First we saw developments on the demand side where there was an increase in movement of what we would call more essential items, medical supplies, foodstuffs. We saw that demand really increase significantly, whereas we obviously saw less demand for non-essential items, automobile parts, which automobile parts is a huge player in Thailand, so that had an impact. Tires also, Thailand's the 4th largest producer of tires, so huge issues. Fall down in electronics, white goods, this all had an impact. And we certainly saw this in Thailand as part of the broader picture. And in 2020, in Thailand was already starting out as a rather anemic year for exports. Early in the year, volumes were trailing 5 to 7% below 2019. And then in May through July, it fell even further. We're talking 10, 12, 14%. Finally back down to about 10% in July. This is below the 2019 number. Thailand's manufacturing sector decreased by over 14% between April and June. And that had a substantial impact on clearly the local economy. But fortunately within Zim Thailand, there's been management of capacity with carriers at a broader level, but even locally here in Zim Thailand, our volumes are up 22% over last year. In a market that's down, 12, 14%. It's largely because a couple reasons. We've been very aggressive in the market, and we've specifically pushed on those commodities which have continued to move. Our key accounts have also been very, very supportive of us during this time period, and we've worked hard to increase their share of business. And then one thing I mentioned earlier about the foodstuffs have been very strong, and the fresh fruit market out of Thailand has continued to be really robust. And reefer cargoes in particular have been very strong, particularly during the past durian season. And durian demands a high price in China in the market. So it's a very valuable commodity to move. And we're in a fortunate position, I have to say, because both Zim and Gold Star Line have both quite young reefer fleets, so that we're able to support the very sensitive cargoes. And we've got a very unique tracking, notification, 24/7 type of support product called Zim Monitor, which really helps these reefer products and those customers that want to keep a really close eye on their most valuable shipments. And that's really, really been a game changer for us, all of those things together, to really grow the business despite a very difficult time and a very uncertain time. So in general, the carriers, I will say, they've been very prudent and very active in managing their capacity against the changes in the market. And in our case, we've been very nimble to react to demand changes within the broader market. So it's been a very interesting time.
Really? It's interesting you talk about those changes and the disruptions and the way you've had to move to do things. Just a quick one. What percentage of your staff have you been able to have work from home during lockdown? We all know that logistics supply chain is an essential industry in virtually every country. But what percentage have you been had at home versus on the tools in the business? In the workplace?
For the first, when we started going work from home, we split it into team A, team B.
Yeah.
So we had for essentially operations, customer support, sales was 100% from home because it was not necessary that the salespeople necessarily be in the office. Mm-hmm. So customer support and operations were 50% in the office. Finance was 50% in the office. The counter activity, where we receive funds and we dispense paperwork, they remained in the office 100% of the time. We had certain protocols to ensure that we didn't have any cross-contamination and maintain the health of the staff. However, we tried to go 50-50 with the counter, and it became difficult. It became very difficult. But I think it was kind of an eye-opener both for us and for our customers in terms of over-reliance on paper in the industry.
Cool. So in what way, you mentioned customers, good opportunity to explore that just a little bit. To what degree have you had to pivot or to change the way you deal with customers? Has there been more pressure in the ways that you had to deal with customers, given that it's harder to get face-to-face? And how has your customer-facing teams managed that?
No, really. I think, by and large, we were already progressing down a pathway of more customer-friendly type of e-commerce tools, shall we say, no. and allowing customers the opportunity to dictate how they want to manage the relationship with us. We've got a tool that we use to solicit a lot of feedback from our customers on terms of how they want their online tools to look. And that platform has given us a lot of feedback on what we produce in terms of e-commerce. So we have products like MyZim, eGSL, eZim, that allow customers to submit bookings, shipping instructions, track their shipments, print BLs, all that kind of stuff. And now we've got Wave, which is our EBL product, which is a blockchain-based product that's completely paperless to allow customers to really change how they deal with their international shipments and their customers themselves. Okay. So I think what COVID did was it moved both the carriers and the customers down this pathway faster. It accelerated the process to changing the method in which we deal with one another. The challenge is there are oftentimes, our customers do want to talk to people, and they want to talk to people in their own language, and they don't want to necessarily always go online. Occasionally we all run into issues that we need expert help on. And so for that, we provided our staff with the technology in order to manage these customer relationships from home. Everybody had pocket Wi-Fi, laptops, the ability to access the system. There were technological hurdles, but they were resolvable. But it also had to change the way we manage these individuals. And perhaps that's the greater ongoing challenge is how do you manage that kind of staff that's very disparate. But I will say, neither carriers, in our case, or customers are as afraid of this type of work environment. Yeah. I think it's fundamentally changed the game. Previously, we were afraid of this kind of environment. Flex hours scared us. Work from home kind of environment scared us because we weren't prepared to manage it. And I don't think it's ideal, but I think certainly now we're better equipped to handle this kind of situation.
Okay. Yeah, good. Well, thanks for sharing that. There's a couple of big movements trends mega trends that have been occurring in the carrier market over some years now. Of course, we've had consolidation between the carriers into the various confederations and alliances. We've also had the advent of the mega ships. I can't recall how many containers, you probably know to a T, how many containers will fit on the largest container ship in the world. But we've had those two big mega trends happening in recent years. Well, what can you share with us about what it takes for a container carrier to be successful in today's environment and the environment moving forward? What are the big issues?
Well, the debate about the 22,000 TEU, 24,000 TEU ships, that's been going on for time immemorial, right? I remember when APL launched, 6,000 and then 9,000 TEU ships many years ago. They can't get any bigger. They can't get any bigger. There's two elements of what a carrier can do to be successful financially, and one is they need to acquire their assets, however they do that, whether it's charter or purchase, build and purchase at the right time, and it needs to be a type of ship and a size of ship that works very well for their network, and also they need to manage their fuel expenses very wisely, but nobody can predict where the price of ship is going to go or where the price of bunker is going to go 6 months away. I mean, who would have seen bunker price in February doing what it's doing this past February? That would have been nearly impossible to predict. So that kind of thing is I think kind of goes without saying for carriers to differentiate themselves and be successful. I think what is worth talking about and where a carrier has an area of direct control, even though it might be harder to measure the success, is forging stronger relationships with their customer. And we've seen more and more carriers moving to automation and online robots and offshore centers for key customer interactions such as pricing and booking and documentation. And I think there's a place for that. But I also believe that customers do want to speak locally with knowledgeable staff on issues that are important to them. And how can they arrive at solutions that benefit both carrier and shippers, and really have those communication links to manage forward expectations and trends. And there still is a strong need for local sales and local customer service. Now, automation has its place, for sure. But it's not yet a replacement for human interaction. And for carriers to be successful, they really have to recognize this. I think there will continue to be consolidation. There may be bigger ships. There could be much more reasonable sized ships that change the way we manage things. But I think ultimately it's going to be about relationships between carriers and their customers. And here we're really building this thing around what we like to refer to as a Z factor, which is really the quality in our personnel and their relationships that drive the organization forward, and it's part of the company culture. And I think ultimately it's one that will serve to differentiate our company from others. I've worked for a lot of companies, and I recognize how that spirit within the company and the relationship they have with their customers drives loyalty. And in an industry which is so heavily commoditized as ours, what you have is that relationship. And when pricing is equal or largely equal, it's that relationship between customer and organization and company that's going to make the difference, in my opinion.
Sure. So if we talk about that relationship issue as a key differentiator in business and a driver of innovation, I mean, I've had contact with you over the last 10 to 15 years and seen you operate. You've got a very visionary leadership style, if I could put it that way. What do you see as the key? And I ask most of our key interviewees this question: what would be the snapshot 2 or 3 things that you really look for when you're seeking new talent to come into the organization as you're growing? What would be the 2 or 3 things that you immediately look for in new people coming in?
Well, let me talk about the gap in the industry. Okay. And I'll define it through the gap in the industry. I might be turning into a grumpy old man, but what the industry really lacks is knowledge, right? I think that's where we've fallen down. Container shipping and shipping in general went through some really tough times, and one of the first things that got cut was training budgets. And when I first came into the industry, my training program was 6 months long. And I know at Maersk had training programs that were 3 years long, right? So this focus on knowledge and bringing individuals into organizations and really giving them a solid foundation in what it is that our industry is, whether it's supply chain, whether it's 3PL, whether it's forwarding, container shipping, whatever it may be, I think that it's very, very important that the industry provides some knowledge for these individuals. So when somebody comes into the organization and somebody applies, I'm looking for a capacity to learn and an enthusiasm to learn. We rely much more heavily now upon computer-based training, and although that's not necessarily, in my opinion, the ideal method of learning, it is what we have available to us right now. And I think we have to find individuals that are really looking for that, you know, whatever the avenue may be, they want to build their knowledge. And the reason that's so important is because when they go talk to a customer, the conversation can't be just about where do you go and how much is it. And, you know, the customer wants to know that the salesperson is actually understanding their business, understands what their KPI are, understands the customer's needs. And then that salesperson or the customer service person needs to consolidate what the customer needs with what the company needs that they work for, right? And the synthesis of those requirements is where the real power is unlocked. And you can't do that unless you have knowledge and an enthusiasm for learning about what the customer's business is, learning about what your own business is. I think when I interview candidates, that's what I look for is, do I see the enthusiasm and the desire to learn and the desire to ask questions? One of my key factors is not so much what questions an interviewee asks, but how many questions do they ask? Do they have a lot of questions? And what's the quality of those questions, yeah. Right? You know, I want to know that they want to know. Yeah. Because that says something to me.
All right. Good stuff. Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that. And hopefully the audience will pick up some angles off that as a comparative way of looking at candidates for sure. Yep. Couple of quick ones before I let you go and we wrap up. Yeah. Two things. What do you see as the major disruptors currently and just moving forward over the next 6 to 12 months in the container shipping industry? First of all, so disruptors, where are they coming from? What are they? What sort of impact are they having?
You know, like it's the disruptor question is interesting. It's clearly there are any number of transportation purchasing platforms, transportation consolidation platforms that are out there that are attempting to, with, you know, in some cases some success, disrupt the predominantly the forwarding and 3PL type of environment. I don't believe that disruptors are going to be terribly successful in penetrating the BCO type of market. I think BCOs have their transportation purchasing, their logistics departments, or they have strong 3PL relationships. And I don't see them really penetrating that market. Where I do see the disruptors coming from, and these kind of small startup forwarding guys, which can bring a lot of value really, is with the SMEs really pushing some of these paperless, you know, global shipment solutions, right? The electronic bills of lading, and these disruptors don't necessarily have to be utilizing the technology. They can utilize the technology of Zim lines, for example, of Wave or electronic BL. But I think these are the folks that are going to push this technology forward with the SMEs. And I think clearly, if an organization like an SME is willing to go to a marketplace and an electronic marketplace in order to purchase these type of products, then they're going to be much more open, in my opinion, to other e-commerce tools like the electronic bill of lading. So I think that is paramount, and I think that's where they can have a real impact. I would hope that governments and port authorities begin to recognize the value of some of these products. The customers are ready, the carriers are ready, we've got some disruptors, some really cool ideas coming in. But until governments and port authorities recognize that there's a new way of doing business in town, it's going to struggle to grab a foothold.
Let's be hoping that there's plenty of government employees and port authorities listening into this. I know a number of them are clients, so let's hope so. Hey, I know you're a busy guy, and I just got a final question for you. Crystal ball time. You've been in the supply chain and certainly in the container shipping sector and the carrier sector for a long time. What's that industry going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years? So open floor, quick fire question. What are your views? What are the highlights of that sector going to be? What's going to dominate? What are the primary issues around that sector moving forward?
There will still be ships.
Okay.
First and foremost, I'm going to go out on a limb and say we're still going to be ships. Teleportation is not going to happen. I think that the big change is that the administration of international shipments is going to largely move online, and will come out of this need for original documents and stamps and signatures and staples and all of that garbage. Counters, documentation counters like we have today will disappear. All of this stuff will be done online, and that will have huge savings for shipping lines. It will have huge savings for customers and for the government authorities out there. It gives them far more access to data by which to tax. And they have access to all of this information coming in at once. So I think fundamentally the big change is going to be in how we manage shipments. Furthermore, with the amount of big data that's out there, and we haven't done a great job of managing big data. We've done a wonderful job of acquiring big data, but I think the change is going to be that carriers, on the carrier side, carriers and even 3PLs are going to be much more agile in using that data to their benefit. And that will, in the carrier sense, that would be managing supply versus demand and managing the allocation on ships and the equipment supply, where it needs to be, when it needs to be there. From a customer perspective, it's going to increase the agility of the supply chain. And when we look at, there are a number of customers that are, say, moving out of the manufacturing concentration hubs in China. They realize that perhaps that wasn't the great idea. In the case of a pandemic, it can be downright, bring them to a halt. So many companies are looking to kind of move some of their manufacturing around and move away from a specific cluster area. And I think that's going to require an agility of their supply chain, which will rely upon the data and the reactivity of their supply chain partners, be it a 3PL, be it a carrier, whatever that may be. Those partners are going to have to react very, very quickly. And that data is going to be critical to that. And so I think 3PLs and carriers are going to get much more intelligent about how they manage all the data that they acquire. So I think, fundamentally, we're still going to have ships. We're going to still move things from one point to another. We're just going to do it, I think, more intelligently, and the time on the ground of shipments will not be as a result of paperwork and the burden of administration overhead, shall we say.
Yeah, good. I really appreciate you sharing those insights. And I know you're very hands-on, so you're hands-on with what's going on now, so it doesn't surprise me you've got some pretty clear ideas about what's going to be happening in the future, especially that there's still going to be ships.
Yeah.
Hey, just a final question before I do let you go, since I've got you. A bit more sort of umbrella or helicopter view, not in shipping or carriers. For other business leaders, maybe business owners who are working through the current phase at the moment, a couple of quick tips from you, things for leaders to focus on for business success moving forward. What comes to the top of your mind?
what comes to mind most immediately is the need for business leaders to stay in touch with what's happening with their people. It's a very uncertain time, and depending upon the pervasiveness of the virus in various countries, it can set people off in really interesting and different ways. And I think sometimes people need to feel that, you know, things are going to be okay, and we're going to get through this, and they need some assurance that the business is going to continue to move forward. We're going to step up to the challenges. We're going to do it together, and we're here to see you through that. But we also need to manage each individual differently because everybody has different needs. Yeah. We also need to then, as they say, kind of batten down the hatches on the basics of the business, ensure that our cash flow is secure, ensure that our business has continuity, and much like the shipping industry did in terms of managing its capacity very carefully, that was, okay, let's look at the perimeter and see where we have some exposure and then tighten up that perimeter. So we also have to do that. We're going to look at the perimeter, see where we have gaps, see where we have exposure, and really let's focus on what's going to drive the business through in the short term so that we can come out the other side and we're healthy, we can expand, we've got cash, and we're not strapped. And that's obviously easier said than done. And some industries are impacted differently. But clearly I think, you know, we don't have a business without people. So we got to start there. And then, you know, when we have our people taken care of at the kind of same time, then we got to look after the fundamentals of the business.
Good stuff. Well, Dave, look, I really do appreciate your insight and your honesty and sharing some of your reflections, especially around leadership and running businesses. Absolute pleasure talking to you. Wish you and Zim and your crew in Thailand well. Hanging out to catch up for another Thai meal with you next time I'm in town when travel's back in fashion. Thanks so much for sharing your time with us.
Thanks so much, Kim. I really appreciate it.
And thank you for our audience for joining us. And by all means, catch up with us on Logistics Executive TV for further podcasts. Thanks, Dave. Catch up with you soon.
Thanks so much, Kim.
Bye.